Alright. This is a part 2 on how to create underwater images with your GoPro, and it's pretty exciting because I think it's the first time I do a part 2 of a video, and that shows that people are actually interested in the stuff I put out. So thank you. Alright, I'm gonna spare you an intro. You've seen the title, you've seen the thumbnail, so you know what you're here for. We're gonna get right into it. Just know that there's a part 1 of this on how I created these images, and you can find it on my channel. Alright, so let's go into Lightroom, and this is our image. GoPro's color don't do a great job at depicting what the colors actually are like underwater. It definitely does not have this green look, so that's what we want to get rid of. So the first thing I do is recropping my image. So I'm going to center my subject a little bit more. This is going to be posted on Instagram, so I'm going to do 4:5. For the basic adjustments, what we want to do is modify that white balance. So we're going to take it down a bit so that it gets more blue, and drag it until your highlights are starting to look white. Right about there. That's really blue, but we will change the saturation afterwards in the HSL. I like where that is. What I always do is bring up the contrast a little bit, as well as the clarity. A little bit more highlights, so to get those whites up there a little bit brighter. Less shadows so that we get more depth in the water, and same thing with the blacks. Next up is the tone curve. For the tone curve, I do a very simple S-curve. So I bring up a little bit in the shadows, bring down the highlights so they're not as sharp and they're more diffused. Colors now, this is where most of the job is done. So we want to modify the blues, get it more deep blue. I don't want to go to an aqua color. I don't think this is just as realistic. So I like deeper blue, and obviously we want to bring down the saturation a lot. So I take it down to about -60 on both. Here we go. And we want to bring up a little bit luminance in the aqua, a little bit down in the blue, so again we get a deeper blue color in the water. Next up is detail. We're going to sharpen a little bit our image, play around with that. Alright, and noise reduction. Depending on the clarity of your water, you will get some noise in your images, so this is where you can try to counter that. If you press Shift or Alt, depending on what your keyboard is, you can see what you are actually masking. So I want to get those lines around my subject. I don't want too much detail, and you don't want any at all, so you want to go right along the edges of your subject and what you want to show. Okay, keep going with the calibration. That's where we can change our color again. I want to go a little bit down here, not too much. And you want to bring down the saturation. And here, don't try to remember the numbers because every image is going to work differently. I want you to understand what tool impacts what area of your image so that you can do it to your own image. So I'm going to go back up to basics and readjust slightly. I want to have more contrast and a little bit more texture as well as clarity, maybe not as much highlights, and as well as bring down a little bit more saturation in our blues. Right about here is good. So now what we're going to do is target specific areas of our image with these local adjustments. So what we're going to do is start with the floor, because the light in the water is very diffuse, so the entire image is pretty much lit the same way. So we want to use the gradual filter to light up a little bit our ocean floor. So what we're going to do is create a mask like this to bring up the exposure. Go down in contrast a little bit, more highlights, a lot more highlights, and same thing with the whites all the way. A little bit more detail with the texture. By using a little bit of dehaze, we have more exposure as well. and a little bit more clarity. I'm gonna go a little bit further so we get the whole floor, the whole bottom of our image. That looks about right. Next up we have masks filter, and that's where we're gonna bring up those skin colors and skin tones. This really changes the entire image. So this is the part where you paint in your subject. It is the part that takes the longest in editing this photo, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm not gonna redo it. I'm gonna copy and paste from my original edit. Here we go. So just pasted my filters, and I'm going to show you what I did. So I did two filters, one on the bathing suit and one on my subject. For the skin tone one, what I did is bring up the exposure, a little bit more contrast, more shadows, more whites, more blacks, just because it was very underexposed. A little bit more texture, so it's more sharp. And more importantly, what I did was adding a color right here. So you tap that, and then you just start picking whatever color you want your subject to appear. If you want to bring more greens, if you want to bring more blues. I obviously went for an orange. Same thing for the bathing suit. What I did was bring up the temperature and tint so that we get more realistic blue and white color on the bathing suit. We have more exposure, same thing, highlights, shadows, whites, bring it up so that we get more light into your subject. Same thing, dehaze a little bit so you have a little bit more contrast. And because if you don't use it, you'll see it's just too washed off, too white. So a little bit dehaze to bring up the contrast. And same thing, I use the color very minimal adjustment, but it's just more white, 6% saturation only. Another filter I used was radial filter, and for this what I ended up doing was creating two on each side. And the reason why I use those is to create darker edges for framing my subject. So what I did is a little bit less exposure, more contrast, less shadows, and I come here and create two on each side. Here, darken the edges right here, and same thing on the other side. That just draws the eyes right to your subject, so you get this nice curve here and there. And lastly, I want to clean up my image using this spot removal to clean up those small details that are distracting and taking away from the photo. Same thing here. I'm not going to redo it because this is pretty tedious and very long, and you don't really need to see me do that. You just know how to use it. I'm going to copy and paste from my original edit. Okay, there we go. And that's pretty much how I edit my underwater photos. I want to finish with giving a few extra tips. I want to show you 3 shortcuts that I use on Lightroom to make my workflow just a little bit faster. We're going to focus on local adjustment for these shortcuts. The thing I like to use the most is when I'm brushing here. You can either brush or erase, obviously, by using, you have 2 brushes and 1 eraser tool. What you want to do is when you're brushing, you can press Alt and it will automatically go to erase. You don't have to go back and click. That's a pretty useful tool. Another one is the key O. If you press O, it shows you the selected area. Obviously, you can go click Show Selected Mask Overlay here, just faster if you press O. And same thing for showing or hiding pins. So for example, with your spot removal, once you've done all your adjustments, it shows you the pins. And if you click H, it's just gonna hide those so you can see what you're working with. So here are the 3 shortcuts. I use H to hide pins or to show pins, O when I wanna see the selected area, and when I'm brushing, I use the Alt key to go back from erasing to painting. All right, I think that covers about everything. And here is our before and after. It was the first time for me doing this kind of tutorial videos. I hope it was informative. I hope you liked it. I have no idea if I'll be doing more of these in the future. The interest was specific for underwater photography, so this is the reason why I've done it. But maybe I'll be doing more. New video every week is a lie I've been telling myself for years. I have no idea how often I upload, but if you want to see the next video I'll be posting, you can just subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified when I do so. Peace out.